At my old newspaper, we had a rule, a hard and fast rule, that if you wanted to use an anonymous source in a story, you had to have one of the top editors sign off on it, top 2 editors in the newspaper. You had to be willing to tell us who your source was and why that was the only way you could get the story. And you also had to have it from another source.
2 years ago, when I was just a reporter here, I wanted to write a feature story on the use of Adderall on campus. It was right before finals week, so it was kind of the time where college students, it's a topic that bounces around. And everyone that I talked to wanted to be anonymous because, you know, it's an illegal drug.
Yeah, I think it's ethical to use anonymous sources. I think you have to use them very, very carefully. You know, there's no ethical canon that says, hey, they're a disaster and they're awful and you should never use them, but you have to beware.
I would say only in like the most extreme of circumstances should you be using anonymous sources. Normally it's just, you want to be as transparent as possible with people, and using anonymous sources is just kind of like a block in between you and the reader.
I think that it's preferred not to use anonymous sources. I think that 95% of the time you shouldn't use anonymous sources, because I think credibility in the media has already sunk to all-time lows. And I think one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons is anonymous sources.
You have to be careful when you use all anonymous sources. I think if one of your sources is anonymous, that to me is okay, but if the entire story is built on anonymous sources, I don't think I would approve that.
Like, all of those different factors need to be kind of considered when you're protecting a person's like identity. I think it's more like protecting the information, I guess, protecting the information that you're receiving from them, and then considering like their reasoning for being anonymous is a big part of it.
Okay. You're trying to find the balance between, you know, because you don't want people to use anonymity to just say whatever they want to say. They need to be accountable for what they say, so you need to do like kind of a cost benefits balance there in between, you know, what they're saying and, you know, your trust with your readers. Because when you have an anonymous source, you're kind of asking your readers to really trust you on that, and so you really have to kind of weigh the costs and negatives.
I think if it's an important enough story, you know, if it's a story that really needs to be told and it's the only way you can get the story, then I think an anonymous source is okay. But I also think that you need to have it from more than one source almost all of the time.
If somebody is actually in danger, it's probably ethical to use them anonymously. You don't want to do something that's going to endanger somebody's life. And you know, in that case, it's almost mandatory.
I think some of both.
Probably both to some extent.
Both things are true. I mean, you know, if somebody's anonymous and they know they're not going to be quoted, they're sort of off the hook, right? They can say whatever they want. They can make something up entirely and mislead you, and it can be inaccurate, and you can report that.
It just depends on the situation. I mean, when you're dealing with really sensitive information like a rape, I mean, most of the time I would say no, because for someone to even go and talk to someone about that is a big step. But as we've seen with, you know, the Rolling Stone story, there are times where you have to still fact check stuff. You can't just kind of go off like what people are saying as truth.
So being cognizant and aware of what they're saying and why they're saying it, I think is like big when you're using anonymous sources. As why are they giving me this information, and why don't they want to be identified? And making sure that they're giving you like facts, and you're not letting them have too much liberty with like throwing their opinions into it, especially considering that you can't really attribute that opinion to any person with a face.
My very first job was at a smaller newspaper, and we had a reporter who made up stories, and we finally made up sources for stories. We finally, the city editor came to me and said, I think that the quotes in the story are too good to be true. And so we tried to track down the people in the story, and it turned out we couldn't find them. We confronted the reporter, and he had made them up, mostly because he was lazy and thought he could get away with it. And I guess that in the end, if you've got enough editors asking, how do we know this, and where did the information come from, and editors who start to question quotes that sound too good to be true, you're going to get caught and you're going to get fired.
At the Daily Nebraskan, we have source forms. So I think a way to sort of avoid or a reporter fabricating a quote is to still get the names of these people, but not publishing their name in the story, if that makes sense. So the only people that would know who they actually are myself and the reporter.
Basically, whenever you use an anonymous source, you are saying to your reader, trust me. Somebody actually said this. That's a big thing to do. And you don't want to do that too often unless the stakes are really high. Because you really do have an obligation as a reporter to share, your sources with people. And you can't be asking people, the public, your readers or your viewers, to just trust you on things. Eventually that erodes your credibility.